to see you. I'll try to ask my questions in a compressed way also, so you can have most of the time to answer them. I want to focus more on the Palestinians' pursuit of statehood or recognition by UN agencies, and understanding that our policy is that we withdraw from those agencies and cease funding when a unilateral action is taken like that. How can we, if you could walk us through your thoughts on how perhaps a unilateral approach to that concern, which is obviously a very significant concern, may not be the best strategic approach for us. Instead of maybe a focus in an a la carte way, to use your term, like with the ICC and or the IAEA, if we were going to try to leverage our participation in a way that is, a more micro-targeted approach to respond to wildly inappropriate actions like the Palestinians. The other issue is on Israel's treatment in general at the Human Rights Council and our ability to leverage our membership in the Human Rights Council. What are we doing to get the Human Rights Council? How are we using our membership to get the Human Rights Council to stop almost exclusively focusing on their obsession with Israel and actually focus on very significant, serious human rights abuses in Syria and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba, just to name a few? Then just a couple of others on humanitarian assistance. It's been for the entire existence of the United Nations that we've essentially shouldered the burden of financing much of what it does. How do we encourage more cost sharing from wealthier countries that actually have the ability to step up? And how can we use UN Security Council 2139 to encourage other donors to do that, particularly rich Gulf nations, for example, that have the resources but choose not to use them? And then lastly, if you could just cover the issue of UN reform, because I know the United States position is that reform and economy, accountability, integrity, and excellence are all essential. And so what are we working on in that regard?
Thank you, Congresswoman. On the Palestinian question, I just would underscore that we will oppose attempts at upgrades in status anywhere. We are in very close touch now. We have a monthly meeting with the Israelis where we look out at the sea of cities, including treaty bodies and treaties and so forth, and coordinate with them and also try to understand whether they are prioritizing in particular ways, sort of along the lines of what you're suggesting. The ICC is, of course, something that we have been absolutely adamant about. Secretary Kerry has made it very, very clear to the Palestinians, as has the president. This is something that really poses a profound threat to Israel. Is not a unilateral action that will be anything other than devastating to the peace process, which is again where all of our efforts should be placed right now. Before the peace negotiations started between the two parties restarted with Secretary Kerry's and the president's leadership, we were fighting on every front. For sure, contesting unilateral efforts on every front, and that is what we would do in any event. Because we don't think that this is a productive approach. We don't think there are shortcuts. And we know that this can be an effort to delegitimate Israel. At the same time, it's an effort to upgrade Palestine status. I think my point on the waiver and the funding issue is that the American people and the United States are so much better off when the United States is in good standing within these organizations, defending our interests, fighting for our friends, and not surrendering the playing field to those that would do like nothing more than for the United States not to be in these organizations. So we're not punishing the Palestinians if we cut off funding to these agencies. We're punishing U.S. interests. And that is why, again, we need to deter precisely the moves that are at the spirit behind the legislation is to deter Palestinian action. That is what we do all the time and will continue to do. But we cannot surrender the vast range of U.S. interests in the process. Very briefly, on the humanitarian assistance, the cost sharing, maybe I'll just touch upon that since it hasn't come up before. The Kuwaitis have been the ones in the Syria context who have hosted the last two donors conferences, and we think this is progress and an example of the kind of leadership. I mean, they've really shown tremendous leadership on the humanitarian situation. We seek to mobilize resources from the countries that you've alluded to, and you have seen emerging economies, like Brazil and others, make contributions in a new way in light of the scale of the catastrophe. But we still think there's a lot of room for others to be doing their fair share, and particularly those wealthy countries in the region, a region that stands to be very destabilized, again, by the effects of this crisis. I'll just leave it at there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ambassador, thank you so much for